in order to facilitate most of our esteemed panel members, we will make this discussion in English. So as you understand, gentlemen, we have several headwinds against this panel. We have a diversity issue. We're last panel discussion and we're late. So we need to overperform in order to be able to maintain the energy level of this panel. And of course, from remotely, okay, Michael, I think, hello. So this, oh yes, Jake is coming. Better late than ever, don't worry. So we're full house. So this particular discussion regarding the energy climate target of European Union and how we can utilize our variety of renewable sources and other technologies is very close to my heart. And I was really glad when the French-Greek Chamber of Commerce and Industry decided to energize this panel. It is true that Europe has a passionate commitment on the energy climate for 2040 and onwards. A passionate commitment, but that requires, if not sacrifices, certainly a transformation, a deep transformation in what we do and how we do it. So there are several really questions if the supporting industries follow up this energy transformation. Are we truly utilizing fully the full basket of tools and the full toolkit that we have in our disposal? And of course, last but certainly not least, a discussion that has come up in the last years, if European Union is actually shooting too much or shooting at our legs, perhaps hindering our competitiveness in the global market, or to look at the positive side of it, how best we can maintain our path towards this target, how to increase our energy efficiency, and how, at the same time, maintain progress and maintain our competitiveness as a European Union. So, in this panel, I believe we have the best group to address these issues, from policy, implementation, and tools. But I will start with Mr. Nikos Tsafos, who is, for several years now, the Chief Energy Advisor to the Prime Minister, but not only in this, you have a huge experience from over 30 countries, I understand, and consulting companies and governments, plus your academic background in energy. So can you give us, let's start with Greece first. What do you believe, what's your view? Are we doing the best we can in order to achieve this climate agenda and their very demanding targets we have?
Thank you very much for that question, and thank you for having me. Let's talk numbers. Greece has undergone a remarkable transformation in its energy system in the last decade plus. Our generation from lignite is down 87% relative to 2005. This is the lowest level of generation from lignite since the early 1970s. In the place of lignite, we have seen renewables boom. Routinely, last year we had renewables on average be about 45% of the system, 57% if you add hydro. Right now those numbers are a little bit higher, probably closer to 48%, 49% and 60% with hydro. We have more than doubled our installed capacity of wind and solar. If you look at rankings of countries in the world, if you take an expansive view and you include all countries, we have the 4th highest penetration in the world in terms of how much of our electricity comes from wind and solar. If you take out smaller countries that mostly import their electricity, we're number 2, behind Denmark. Okay? So when I look at these numbers, I say, that is remarkable. There are not a lot of lists in the world where Greece is number 2, at least not where 2 is a good number. And I think that speaks to the incredible transformation that has taken place. We have invested a lot in our grids. Our investment between 2019 and 2023 has tripled at the transmission and the distribution level. For a decade, our grids had been totally neglected, and finally, we're trying to make up for that difference. If you look at emissions, greenhouse gas emissions in all of Europe, we do our targets in Europe relative to 1990. That's a little bit of a distortion because it includes the deindustrialization effect from the collapse of the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact countries. If you look at it relative to 2005, which is sort of the last full year sort of before the crisis, Greece has the largest percentage decline in greenhouse gas emissions in all the European Union. And some of this, of course, was because we had an economic crisis. That was a driver until 2013. But even after that, we've had a huge decline in emissions and energy use, primarily because of reducing lignite. So I'll end with sort of 3 very brief observations. One is we are a country that has great sun, great wind, and great offshore wind. And we think that if we fully exploit these resources, we expect to be net electricity exporters. In fact, we are at the moment net electricity exports. If you look at the last few weeks, this is a temporary thing, it could change, but structurally, we think we have a very good position to sell electricity to the world. That's number one. Number two, I would say that from a policy perspective, our most pressing need is how to manage this success, because as renewables have exploded in the penetration, we have very low prices, zero prices, negative prices, we have curtailment, and so the real question is how do we make the system fit for the world that we live in and that's coming? For the last 20 years, we tried to put renewables into the system. And now we have to change the system because the renewables have taken over. And this is not a Greek challenge. When I talk to colleagues from around Europe and I describe them what's happening in Greece, they tell me that's exactly what's happening here too. So this has to be a European conversation. And last but not least is we don't have the full data yet, but based on the data that I see, I feel very confident saying that if you look at Greek emissions of CO2 in 2023, transportation probably surpassed electricity generation as the largest source of emissions in the country. So I know that we have a tendency when we talk about energy and decarbonization to just obsessively focus on electricity. Sooner or later, electricity will not be enough for us to drive down our emissions. And so the next front is to make sure that we can take that progress and see how we can replicate it in all the other sectors. And with that, I'll stop.
Thank you very much. Now we'll turn to Mr. François de Ricolfis from the French Embassy. You have a huge experience in the area, I would say from the Balkans, Mid East, Eastern Mediterranean. What do you perceive as the main implication of this renewable transformation to the industries themselves? I mean, how they operate. We have, in many cases, subsidies or not subsidies. We have imports from third countries. Also, other, I would say, balance of interest from consumer to provider. What do you perceive is the main implication of this transformation to industry?
In a way, the word is right. It's transformation. And in a way, it's a bit like the Industrial Revolution. And what does mean an industrial revolution? First, it starts slowly and then it accelerates, and we all are taken by surprise. And this is a pattern which repeats over and over. And then it means that old interests, vested interests, are sent away. So we can look at what's happening in two ways. The first is we need to adapt a lot of things, the way we produce energy, the way we produce the sources of energy. That is, who's building what? And then we have to look at, and this is born from the Russian crisis, we have to look at sovereignty and independence and trades-off. And this is sort of circularity. We first built renewable energies because we wanted to produce less GHGs, we wanted to save the planet, which is still a very right objective. And then we added the issue of delinking, of reducing dependencies. And the two feed one another. We reduce dependency, this is consequences, and then it becomes an aim. And then the issue is to avoid creating new dependencies. The classical example is what happened with solar panels. They've all done in China. It's all very well for China. It's a weakness. It's a potential source of conflict or dependency. So how we can avoid it for the other source of energy, for batteries, for solar wind, for batteries, whatever comes next. And what is the trade-off between consumers and producers? I mean, consumers are very happy with low prices, and as Nikos said sometimes, zero prices, which is stupid. Nothing should have no price. It doesn't make sense. So we have to balance all these interests. So France and Europe have made a choice. They said we need to rebuild an industry. We need to have local capacity. So we'll hopefully have gigafactories, we'll have industries. The US have had the same idea. It's called the IRA, and I must say that IRA is a much more efficient machine than the EU machine, so we maybe have to think about how we work and how we organize ourselves. Do we work with subsidies? Do we work with tax credits? That's basically the issue. So we have to think about all of it, and we should never forget one thing that's called the Jevons paradox. The cheaper the energy, the more we consume. So it's, again, a loop. And in the end, the objective is overall should be to use less energy as a whole. So we will use more power. The statistics in France say that the use of electricity will increase by between 20 and 50% according to scenarios. It means we will have to invest 100 billion euros in the grid. 100 billions. That's something like 10 nuclear energy tranches. So it's quite a large amount of money. So we have to think about that, and we have to think on policies which make sure that we produce energy in a better way, but we consume less. And this feeds with other public policies. Housing, transportation, etc. I could go on and on. But we have really to see the issue as a whole, not only looking at production, but looking at transportation, at users, and in a way education, saying to people, well, switch off your lights. So we are in the beginning of the big transformation, and it's only starting, as Nikos said. We've done the easy part. We are going to the difficult part.
Yeah, it is certain that we need to do more with less in the very, very near future. But I would like now to turn to Antoine Guimard, representing the industry, I would say, and I would like to hear your view. You are Chief Operating Officer for Akuo Energy, and you actually have quite good experience in you benchmark countries like Greece, France, other European countries. What's your perspective? What do you have to say on is industry in track? Is industry doing their best to support this energy agenda?
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for staying after this long journey. When we talk about energy transition, we all know that today it comes with massive development of renewable energy. It looks obvious like that, but it took 20 years to convince everyone. And when it comes to countries' targets, we have to say that Greece is on the top of the class. I fully support what was mentioned. A lot of things was done, and we should all embrace the objective of Greece in terms of renewable energy deployment. And this is what the industry did, actually. We have a lot of local and international investors that have already invested in the development of renewable energy projects. We have many local industrials and small companies that are seeking for green corporate PPAs more and more. And I'm sure that very soon, the citizens themselves will want to invest in the project via crowdfunding. So it took 20 years for the industry to be ready. And when I mean the industry, I mean developers, investors, banks, insurers, suppliers, general contractors, the whole industry today managed to structure a global, cost-effective, reliable industry that is able to meet the targets. Our job as the industry is to deliver as much as we can green electrons, gigawatt hours of energy everywhere on the planet where it is needed. So I would say that, yes, the industry is ready, the industry is fully committed, and it took some time to be able to meet those targets. Now the real question is, can we do it? And unfortunately, it has been shared all over the day. We have huge challenge with the grid here in Greece and everywhere in Europe. The grid is not ready. TSOs and some TSOs are way behind where they should be in terms of preparation, in terms of anticipation. I mean, we are not discovering today that there is no sun at night. We all know that for millenniums, I would say. So the grid is behind. We see too many abusive curtailments already today. We see some countries, not Greece, but don't even connect anymore new renewable energy projects because they don't just know how to manage them. This is something that we are facing today. So we are lacking anticipation of the change of the grid. We put all the burden on the generation side, I would say, on the producers, on the sponsors to be able to transform the mix with more renewable. That's perfect. And this is what we are ready to do, and this has been done. Now we are lacking on the physical offtake side, on the TSO side, on the balancing, intraday balancing, seasonal balancing. We are lacking this capability. So the industry is ready, but unfortunately, as it was said earlier today, we may not make it.
Let's take now the view of someone that is a bit more global. I will now turn to Michael. Michael, can you hear us?
I can indeed. I hope you can hear me.
Thank you, very, very loud and clear. Thank you. So I know that the IRENA drives the widespread adoption of sustainable renewable resources. So what do you think are the benefits? I mean, from your global experience in many regions, many countries, what's your opinion about the benefits of a diversified renewables portfolio? And are we really on track to do this, especially in Europe?
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I'm delighted to be with you, unfortunately not in person, to represent the International Renewable Energy Agency. And I was also very pleased to see the title of this session, leveraging a diversified renewable portfolio, because it really goes to the heart of our recent advice, for instance, to the G7. So last year, with the COP28 presidency and the Global Renewables Alliance, we released a report that set out the intellectual and analytical justification for the eventual adoption of the tripling renewable power capacity target by 2030. While the goal is easy to communicate, it is rather generic and it's global, but it's based on our World Energy Transition Outlook, and it's actually based on a build-out predominantly of solar PV and wind power to reach 11 terawatts globally in 2030. Now, those are the big ticket contributors to the capacity, but there is an absolutely crucial contribution from geothermal, hydropower, sustainable bioenergy, because they're going to be providing us with valuable, firm, typically dispatchable, clean electricity that helps balance that 3.5 terawatts of wind capacity and 5.5 terawatts of solar PV in 2030. At the same time, of course, particularly when we look at Europe, wind power is very important for that seasonal balancing, right? So the complementarity of wind power and solar PV in Europe is very important to achieving the overall level of electricity that we're requiring in the energy transition throughout the year. And it also helps reduce the overall variability at different timescales as well, but to varying extents. Unfortunately, in the report we shared with the G7 3 weeks ago, which is online, you can read if you would like, we have what is always, I think, the standard really in these discussions. There's good news and bad news. So the good news is for the next couple of years, at least globally, we're on track to deliver on the tripling goal. The bad news is that is predominantly due to the growth in solar PV that we've experienced, the very rapid growth in the last couple of years. By 2030, with current policy and macroeconomic settings, it suggests that globally, and this plays out at Europe's level as well, is that we'll probably hit the PV target, but all of the other technologies fall short. So we're essentially looking at exponential growth of solar PV and linear growth for the others. And that's just not good enough, unfortunately. So we expect to miss the target in 2030 by 2.2, 2.3 terawatts of that total of 11. The good news is that we do have time to fix that, but that means that we actually need to act rather urgently to accelerate the deployment of the mature renewables and wind power. And this is, again, very true for Europe as well. So despite welcome progress in the acceleration of onshore wind deployment, we're still way below what is needed to achieve the European targets. The trend for offshore wind, unfortunately for 2030, looks particularly dicey at the moment vis-a-vis the targets, and that's true globally as well. And the problem there, of course, is for offshore wind with the longer lead times. 2030 is kind of tomorrow. So the urgency there is quite important. So we see a range of policy measures that are helping moving things in the right direction, but as the other speakers have highlighted, we're facing challenges in other areas, the key enabling areas, to actually deliver on that. So I'll stop there because that's quite a lot of information. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, we will not be complete if we don't hear the voice of the customer. So Jake, being at least part of an end user in this party, we would like to hear from you. I mean, you lead in Amazon Web Services, at least for EMEA region, the energy and sustainability, the environmental policies and the actions. How's it going? Are you satisfied?
That's a broad question. How's it going? It's going well. I think for Amazon, we've been the world's largest corporate purchaser of renewable energy for 4 years running. And so, for us, we are engaged, and you sort of preface that we're obviously the customer voice, but I think we're much more deeply invested and involved in the energy transition and the energy sector than just being a customer. So, we're very much guided by our sustainability goals. So we have corporate sustainability goals, the overarching one being that we want to be net zero carbon by 2040. We announced that in 2019 when we co-founded something called the Climate Pledge and invited other companies to join us in setting a similar goal of being net zero carbon by 2040. One of the ways that we're working to decarbonize and to reduce our emissions is by purchasing renewable energy, by being a corporate purchaser of renewable energy. And so, as I mentioned, we've made a lot of progress on that front in the last number of years. And at this point, we're the world's largest corporate purchaser. We're also Europe's largest corporate purchaser. Around the world, we have more than 500 renewable energy projects. Altogether, our global portfolio is more than 28 gigawatts, spread across more than 25 different countries. It's particularly nice to be here in Greece because we actually have one of our newer PPAs is here in Greece. And we're really excited to be one of the first corporate purchasers to do a PPA here in the country and play a small role in some of the numbers that you mentioned, Nico, in driving the energy transition here in the country. And then I think to build on some of the comments Michael made, we're not just investing in wind and solar. We recognize that you need other technologies, as you mentioned before. The sun doesn't shine at night. We know that too. And so we need other technologies. And so, through our corporate purchasing, we are also enabling battery storage. We're also one of the largest purchasers of offshore wind. Our offshore wind portfolio just here in Europe alone is more than 1 gigawatt of offshore wind. I think we're actually north of 1.5 last I checked. So we're investing in those technologies that are going to be critical to the overall energy transition as well. And beyond that, I think, you mentioned, Nico, that, we can reduce emissions from the power sector, but we've got to focus on the other sources of energy as well. And I'm here from AWS, but across our business, Amazon, we also deliver packages to customers. You may be familiar with that side of our business. Some of you may get those packages. We are working very hard to electrify the fleet that moves those products around the world. And here in Europe, in 2022, we committed to invest over €1 billion in electrifying our fleet. So our light duty, medium duty, and heavy duty delivery vehicles, we have more than 1,000 EVs, electric vans, moving packages across Europe today. We are relying on electric cargo bikes, electric scooters to move packages. In 2023, we delivered more than 150 million packages to customers using electric vehicles. So we're part of that transition, not just on the electricity grid side, but also on that transportation side as part of our business. Across our business, we also have efforts related to water. Within AWS, we have a goal to be water positive by 2030, returning more water to the communities where we use it across our AWS business, where we have our data centers. So sustainability is integrated into every aspect of our business across the company. And that means being an involved participant in the energy transition. It means being involved in decarbonizing transportation. It means being involved in water conservation. And I'll stop there because I can keep going on and on and on to circular economy, to investments in land protection. But I'll pause, given not dominating the entire panel.
Thank you very much. I would now go to François a bit. I would like to understand your perspective, the French government's, or in general the European government's perspective about the policies that we need to implement. I mean, we have an energy transformation from production to distribution to consumption to end users. Do we have enough, or do we have too many policies, and how do they correlate with each other?
It's quite a difficult question to answer. Do we have enough policies, sufficient policies, or what? Especially because it's still mainly driven at a national level. That is, we have the overall EU objective, Fit for 55, you name it. So you have a broad framework, this is where we want to go. And then the how we want to go is still a national issue, and France is famous or infamous because we rely very much on nuclear energy. Today we are more or less, in terms of electric production, it's more or less 60% nuclear, 40% renewable. The rest is very small. And this is something which is quite specific. If you look at Denmark, I think it's 90% renewables. So we still have a degree of freedom which is very large. EU is not a dictatorship, as I'm very sure. So that's one thing. So you have 27 countries and you have 27 policies. Maybe it's too much, I don't know. Maybe the things we have to do is impress, because we have to think as how energy is produced. That's, in a way, maybe it's the easiest part. We have to think of how it's distributed. My neighbor explained the challenge we have and exists in many countries. And then we have to see how we use it. And how we use it is issues as what are the things you have at home, because maybe you need new appliances working differently. You don't need gas heaters, you need electrical heaters, big debate in France and in Germany. You need a different tarification system. You need to invent a completely new way of using energy. That is, instead of having a very predictable pattern of energy. We can say, well, energy comes at your home from 10 to 6, etc. You have to think something which is extremely flexible. I mean, Greece, maybe you have more experience because you use solar heaters for water, so you have an experience on how to be more flexible. In many countries, we don't have this, and we need to think of how we will change the way people use electricity at what time of the day. And lastly, we have to think on how we will adapt to the massive change which is moving to electrical vehicles. I heard about the project of Amazon. Again, this is a life-changing project. We have to change the way that we drive, the way that we use electricity, the way that we organize our networks in terms of chargers, in terms of garage, in terms of repairs, in terms of recycling. So I think there are a number of policies which are yet to be deployed. So to finish, I don't think we have too many. We may have too many national policies, but in terms of each country, I think we still are behind the curve, and we need to develop new tools and to be better coordinated.
Thank you. And as you suggested, I will turn to your neighbor for a question. Okay, policies are policies, but actually politicians and political systems drive them. So what would you expect from the political leaders? What are the political actions that you expect to help this transition?
As I mentioned before, we have a huge gap to fill between what the race industry can do and what the system can accept. What we expect from the political leaders is stability, continuity, and pushing always in the same direction. We need massive investment globally in Europe, here in Greece, but also in other countries, to develop the grid, to develop the balancing system, to make it affordable. We cannot put all the cost on the producers. The cost has to be shared. We mentioned all day long that energy transition has a cost, will have a cost. Either it is small and shared today, or it will be huge for everyone in some decades. So what we need from the political leaders is continuity, stability in the existing regulation. Don't change the framework every day. I have to mention the connection to the grid here in Greece. I mean, it changed 3 times or 4 times the last 2 years. If we want to give visibility to the investors, you cannot apply to IPTO with financial commitments and after 2 years have no clue when you will get your connection. I mean, this is not in line with the country target. So we expect from the political leaders, from the government, to push, to support, and to act in order to unlock this system and allow us, which we are ready, to deliver. Our mission is to deliver. Their mission is to drive and make it possible.
Thank you. That gives me a bridge to go again to Michael. Michael, we would like to ask you again your global perception and view in this. What do you consider, even beyond Europe, beyond our own European microcosm, if I may say so, what do you believe are the key enabling areas to achieve our shared energy and climate targets? And,
Yes.
And how are we going there? I mean, are we progressed? Are we close, or are we far away?
Yeah, so I think there are actually multiple dimensions within which we need to act, and we've laid out, I think, over 20 of them that are crucial to, if you like, both the success of the energy transition, the engagement of civil society, industry, and other stakeholders. But if we need to focus, right? And so we've already heard about the challenge of the grids today and the potential for that to become a brake on the deployment. So we're very focused around some key enabling areas which we think require a lot of attention between now and 2030. That's grids, it's storage, and particularly for our global membership, because we have around 165 member states, financing. So those 3 elements, along with the policy framework and regulatory framework, are crucial. So we've got 4 broad areas. In terms of the grids, it's true, unfortunately, that we haven't planned for success. We haven't, I don't think, believed our story around driving down costs for renewables and the rate of growth that you can achieve when that tipping point is arrived at. Greece is a fantastic example, right? For many years, I lamented Greece's juxtaposition between a fantastic solar resource and slow deployment. But now things have accelerated. We've seen that in the Netherlands and elsewhere in Europe as well with the fossil fuel price crisis of 2022. So we can't let grids be a brake on the energy transition. So we have to accelerate our plans there. We have to assure alignment of TSOs with the actual market expectations of deployment, not their plans from 2 or 3 years ago. We also lack good metrics about how different grids are coping or will cope in a couple of years. We kind of have ad hoc measures which are unfortunately ex post, right? Curtailment is telling us the grid isn't working now, right? But it's also a little bit too late, right, when we get to that point. So that anticipation needs to be there, that planning, that coordination, particularly when we've got new demand sources coming in, as others have mentioned, electrification of heat and transport. So part of, we have a bit of a Swiss Army knife to help with that in the short term, which is storage. So we're piggybacking off the dramatic scale for electric vehicle battery production. We now have potentially very cheap stationary storage coming online over the next decade. That will help us solve some of these problems when we're using it to solve the lack of pace and growth and interconnections between countries, internal grid transmission expansion projects. We can use storage to help ease those problems, deal with the, again, the sun going down at night, which is always going to trip us up if we don't plan for it. And so storage starts to become very important. And we're seeing it, already unlock those kind of solutions. In the US, you're getting to the point where almost all utility scale solar PV projects are going to be built with storage. In Australia, it's being used to reduce exposure to loss factor changes and other issues. So it's a bit of it can help us stay on track if other things aren't going in sequence. Finance is really important. We need more assistance to emerging and developing economies, because even though the G20 might account for 80% of the new deployment that we need, we're still going to miss our climate targets if the rest of the world doesn't come with us. So we need that just energy transition. There needs to be more financial flows to the emerging and developing economies which are struggling. And they're very clear about this. It's not going to happen without that international assistance. And finally, policies and particularly the regulatory environment, super important. We have the templates in many cases with the peer-to-peer learning that IRENA does with its member states. We get them to share that experience, what works in different contexts. So we can expand existing policies which work. In some cases, we will need new policies to adapt to this changing rapid rate of transition, but we can work on that. The key thing is this anticipating where we need to be 2, 3, 5, 7 years from now. And finally, on the market environment, we've heard about the issues there. An energy system dominated by zero marginal cost renewables needs a different framework for the market arrangements and customer pricing. So that needs to happen too. And we've put that off again. So lots to work on, but there's hope.
Thank you. Okay, this discussion usually focuses a lot on production and distribution. But I do believe that in many cases we forget the third pillar, which is energy efficiency. It was discussed briefly in the part, but I would like Jake to give us Amazon Web Services perception, because this is something that we tend to neglect a lot. But how does Amazon Web Services embed energy efficiency in their sustainability strategy, and how important it is for them to reach their target?
Yeah, so look, energy efficiency is core to cloud computing, data centers, and AWS. So if you're not familiar with AWS or Amazon Web Services is the cloud computing part of Amazon. So we operate data centers to provide cloud services to customers around the world. Cloud computing is energy intensive, which means energy efficiency is designed into every aspect of our data centers. So from the cooling systems down to the chips, we are thinking about how to squeeze every bit of energy efficiency we can out of our operations, because we are very much guided by the principle that I think everyone is familiar with, which is the electron we don't use is the greenest electron. And so we are focused on designing chips ourselves that are far more efficient. We're also working with vendors like for our cooling equipment, like the media in our cooling equipment, to help design that media to be more energy efficient. And in fact, we've recently done that and been able to reduce the energy consumption associated with that by 20%. So we're seeing that we're looking at every aspect of our operations. We've even begun switching from uninterruptible power supply systems, UPS systems, to batteries installed in the racks, because it reduces the amount of energy we have, the conversion we have to do between AC and DC power. And by doing that, we reduce conversion loss. So we're focused on every aspect of it, but putting all of that aside, because that's all in the building, the other core piece of energy efficiency when it comes to cloud computing is the energy efficiency benefits from when customers move from traditional data centers and enterprise computing to the cloud. The energy efficiency benefits of leaving traditional on-prem enterprise data centers and shifting to cloud computing, because the utilization rates and because of the design aspects that I've mentioned are significant. A couple years ago, we ran a survey, a study of what the energy efficiency benefits were in Europe of shifting from on-prem and traditional enterprise data centers to the AWS cloud. And we surveyed 5 countries across Europe and had, this was done by a company called 451 Research. And they spoke to data center operators and found that on average, when a customer moved workloads from an enterprise data center in Europe to the AWS cloud, the energy efficiency savings were roughly 5x. So 80% energy efficiency savings, because at the end of the day, the energy efficiency of a professionally run data center in the cloud is just far more energy efficient than running on an on-prem data center. So energy efficiency is into every aspect of how we think about the design, but the key opportunity, one of the biggest opportunities, is just having customers make that transition from the traditional enterprise computing over to cloud computing and getting those energy efficiency benefits.
Thank you really very much. So, Mr. Tsafos, I left you last, not because you are not least for sure, but I would like to make a provocative question to you. If Mr. Mitsotakis calls you later tonight or early tomorrow morning and asks you, okay, out of your discussion, what do you expect the Greek government to, what do you consult the Greek government to start doing immediately, or continue doing much more in the future in order to achieve our goals in energy?
Well, I think there's sort of 2 things that I hinted at the end of my previous comment. I think one is we clearly don't have difficulty in this country attracting investment interest. We have more people trying to invest in this country than we can absorb. We have difficulty in making sure that the system can work with such a very high level of penetration of renewables. We talk a lot about prices. I spend a lot of my time thinking about security of supply. And let me give you some numbers. If you look at the production of wind in Greece so far this year, and you take a day where you walk out and there's no wind, that day we get about roughly 3 gigawatt hours in one day, 3 gigawatt hours. You take a day where there's a lot of wind, where it's like, you can't leave, the boat can't leave, that much wind, that number is 74. And you can go from 3 to 74 in like 2 days, right? It's the same volatility on solar. Those same numbers are 5 gigawatt hours and 40. That's the range so far this year of daily generation of solar. No one is prepared to run a system with that level of unpredictability and volatility. And we have a lot of different things that we're doing for that. Battery storage, our hydro resources in Greece are basically batteries. We turn them up in the morning, we shut them down, we turn them up in the evening. Our interconnectors are essential. We export to our neighbors when we have a surplus. We import when we have a deficit. But really, when I think about the system of the future, with all deference to my tech advanced neighbor here, if I read the model, it tells me that prices are going to go from minus infinity to infinity at any point. We may or may not have locational pricing because electricity will have a different value in every place in the world. If we have the variations that I described, all the EVs and the heat pumps and the air conditioners and the fridges are going to wake up or modulate down to balance the system, and that this is all going to happen with the weather conditions that I just described before. And if I look at that system, I can think that, maybe technologically we can pull it off, but can we pull it off regulatorily? Do we have the commercial models to make that possible? Can people make money in that system? Can that system be sustainable? When I look at the really sort of advanced, 10, 15 years out, I don't think, we have sorted it out in the models. I know what the models tells me. I just don't believe them, that this system will be really sort of stable and I can be reassured that we can have reliable and cheap and sustainable electricity on the electricity side of things. So I think that, to me, is that conversation we knew was coming. It's just coming much, much faster because renewables are moving much, much faster. And the second part, again, on the country is to look beyond electricity. We have a lot of work to do on transportation. We have a relatively old fleet because people didn't buy a lot of cars during the crisis. Our EV penetration is finally at the double digits. We're modernizing our public transportation fleet with the electric buses. I hope we can see them around town. And we have a lot of work to do there with public charging. On industry, we have a very advanced program on CCS. We have 3 major emitters that have gotten money from the Innovation Fund. We are supporting the CO2 infrastructure. We are supporting the storage site up at Prinos. So we're doing some part on industry, and of course in buildings we had a massive campaign on energy efficiency with changing appliances, building retrofits. So we're doing things in all of those areas, but like everyone else, we've just had a lot more progress on electricity than we've had in other sectors. So part of my job is to keep reminding everyone that renewables are great, but if you look at our power system, it's roughly 1/3 of our emissions these days, and we have to have a strategy for the other 2/3.
Thank you very much all, both physically and digitally present. Thank you for bearing with us, extending our time here, and have a nice afternoon.